Welcome to Great Northern Cascade Division in N-scale. There's been quite a bit of progress. You'll see that there's basically another deck that runs along the top of me. Now, I haven't gone crazy and decided to do 4 decks. I am still sticking with just the 3 main decks, but this upper section that's now in place is where the lighting is going to sit. So there's going to be LED strip lighting that will run all the way around on the inside of this. There'll then be kind of a fascia that comes down to cover it. On the top, there'll then be plywood. We'll get to that in part 2 of the video. I haven't quite gotten there yet, but there'll be a plywood top that then goes over it. So it kind of keeps it nice and neat. We'll paint the inside white or a sky blue to kind of help reflect the light back down. And then all the way on the top actually is going to be a little bit of an interesting loop of HO or double O gauge track, and then some trends, because I've got a little bit of a collection of British trends and some HO American scale rolling stock as well. So the main part of this video is going to be building all this additional framework to put the lighting in. We'll talk about, basically the construction technique is very, very similar to the actual main 3 levels of the benchwork, if you've seen one in the early videos. And like I said, then preps us getting ready to start putting some lights in, skyboards in on that 3rd deck, and then we can finally get to start laying some track. So thanks for watching. Please do like and subscribe and follow along if you haven't already, and let me know what you think of this one.
So this is the first section of that lighting framework put in place. I've got the south wall basically done, so to kind of orient ourselves, this is the area where Spokane stations and stuff are going to be. So it's basically the exact same construction that I had used on the rest of the benchwork for the different decks. Only difference here is that these are spaced 2 feet apart. It really doesn't need the same kind of rigidity and strength that the rest of the benchwork does. So we have 1, 2, 3 decks that are actually for the layout itself. They are using 19/32 inch plywood, so that's 4-ply plywood, cut to 2.5 inch wide strips, and then it was basically just 1x3 furring strips almost, that are then all of the cross pieces between it. And I talked about in the previous video, but just for a quick recap, the reason that it's kind of a mix of materials is a mix of strength and weight. So I had originally looked at making everything out of plywood, but because I'm hanging at least 2 decks, that was going to start to add up in terms of weight and potentially cost as well, just because I have so much bench work. So it's a mix then, 1x3 strips in between. But for the benchwork itself, for all three of the decks, all the way and on the other side of the center peninsula, they are spaced at 1 foot intervals, 12-inch intervals. Up on the lightning deck, the exact same thing. It's plywood, although this is actually 15 by 32 inches, so it's slightly thinner. Again, doesn't need to be quite as strong. It saves a little bit of weight and a little bit of cost. It's still the same 1 by 3 furring strips that then go across everything. But like I said, these are then spaced at 2 foot intervals. Really just because it's going to be strips of LED lights. There's almost no weight to them. And so what will probably end up happening is there'll be a thin strip of something. I haven't decided whether it will be wood, it might be plastic or metal in terms of potential heat from the LED lights, but there'll be some kind of strip that'll run across between those 1 by 3 furring strips, and the LED lights will attach to those. So in terms of dimensions, the Lightning Deck 6 sits 16 inches above the actual top deck. So it's actually comparable to what the lower deck is. I think the lower deck spacing, it's 15 inches from the top, the top of where the lower deck is to the bottom of where the fascia is going to come down to. So there's 15 inches spacing there. And so it's very similar, 16 inches of spacing here. Just because this is much more at eye level, and so can make a little bit more scenic pop. Not so much around here, but in the center peninsula area, I somewhat should have planned this a little bit further ahead and made this center peninsula wall a little bit higher. So now we've got to do a little bit more construction in the middle to raise the height of that. But along here is where Interbay Yard is going to be. And so there'll be much more of a scenic backdrop along here. And then the same on the other side of the peninsula, like kind of this backside. That's where Seattle downtown stations are going to be, or just south of downtown. So I'm going to do the east wall of the basement along here, and then this gray wall here, so I can get all of that framed where it attaches onto the walls, and then just some very quick additions onto this 2x4 framework in the middle, so that I can then do the exact same kind of construction here. So the ones on that walls, that east wall, that north wall, they'll be the exact same as this. Just have those 1x3 strips onto the plywood. The middle, it's still going to be plywood 1x3 furring strips, but the same as I did here. These are going to actually cross all the way through that center wall, still at the 2 foot spacing rather than 1 foot spacing. Again, it doesn't need to be quite as strong, but it certainly feels a little bit more complete having that first lighting deck up. Now you kind of get to see where it's going to be. In terms of what's going to be on top, very thin plywood, not even 5/32 inch, probably more like 9/32, about a 1/4 inch, or 3mm ply, something like that. Something fairly thin, fairly light, but still that gives some kind of rigidity. One, because obviously I don't want to be just looking straight up here and being able to see through. Need something that's going to cover it, so that the light would reflect down. And it'll probably also get painted white as well, same thing, just to kind of reflect the light. Or possibly a light, but I haven't decided if it will be white or like a sky blue. I'm still thinking and researching different options for that. But then on top, I've kind of talked about there'll be basically a high-level line that'll run around for HO and 00 gauge as well. So basically there's going to be a track that'll sit probably just an inch or two back from the edge here. And that'll have HO and 00 gauge trains running around that I also have in the collection. That'll be pretty much it. So I'm going to crack on and do that east wall, north wall. We'll come back and we'll check out and see what that looks like, and then try and figure out the additions on this center peninsula.
Alright, so this is the rest of the lighting deck, all completed now around the exterior part of the walls at least. You can see how it joins over onto that south wall that we looked at, that long 32-foot section. So exact same construction method that I had used. Did a quick little time-lapse video. Hopefully that shows how they go together. So that's all now done. There is about 3 inches, 4 inches maybe, in terms of a gap up to that air that runs around, the air vent that runs around, and so I need to figure out exactly where that air show 00 line will come to. It might end up coming all the way to here, and then basically just have a reversing detector that'll then shoot the trends off the other way. So happy with how that's come together. I'm gonna take a little bit of a break now and then figure out building an extension on the center peninsula just to raise it up a little bit, and then I can put that final section in using the same construction method going all the way through. So hopefully this will be somewhat quick. That last section is just basically 3 long modules to try and put together. So this is now that kind of upper extension on the middle peninsula wall. A little bit frustrated at how much time it's taken and how much thought has had to go into this to be able to do it. You know, when I had originally done it, I don't quite know what I had envisioned in terms of the lighting height, and so I had thought, you know, okay, if we don't bring what had been the original wall all the way up, that's fine. There's a skyboard will go in there, will cover it. It's still less than 8 feet if I had just built it as a standard 8-foot frame wall, so it still needed some amount of trimming off that, you know, I just hadn't been in a position to really calculate at the time, but hindsight, whatever. It's in now. I've got some more uprights to do, and every 2 feet. This was just to kind of space it out and get it mostly framed, so I can quickly put those other pieces in now. It won't take too long, and then start to do this cross framework for the actual lighting deck. And again, there's just going to be skyboard that kind of covers all of that anyway, so I'm not too concerned as to how it looks. And honestly, because of the size of the skyboard, it gives a little bit more to attach to, which I think is what I had originally thought, that even if I had left it at a higher elevation to begin with, I still would have wanted to put some kind of cross pieces in because the skyboard was so big. Whatever, it's done now, so I can kind of add in those extra cross pieces now, and then I can start to put the actual framework in place for that lighting deck. This is now with all of that upper lighting deck now completed. I had put the additional uprights in, and then I've put in the basically 3 8-foot sections that go all the way across. So a little bit of a time-lapse video and a couple of time-lapse videos probably, depending on how I edit all of this together, just to show how it all went together. So happy with how this has now turned out. I think I'm going to call it an end to this video. Is kind of this first section, all the lighting deck is in place. And I think what I'll end up doing is probably the second video where I'll then cut the plywood tops to actually go over everything. Also going to then drill holes, kind of like I have done in all the other bench work, drill some holes through those uprights, because there will be DCC line and probably an accessory DC bus, the same way that I done on the 3 main decks for that 00/HO gauge line that's going to run along the top. and then again probably also then paint it white or sky blue. Haven't decided on that yet, so that might end up getting left for another video as well. Haven't quite decided, but overall happy with how this has turned out. It was a little bit of an effort. As you might have seen in some of the videos, I'm also wearing an elbow brace. I have torn some tendons in my elbow, and I have some old scarring of tendons as well, so it's kind of why progress has been a little bit slow. I've been waiting on trying to get some treatment on that, but with the cortisone shot and some physical therapy, it's improving a little bit. But we'll see how it holds up once I start lifting sheets of plywood 7.5 feet up into the air. But thanks for watching this one. Hopefully you have enjoyed it. If you haven't already, then please do subscribe and follow along so you can keep track of the additional process as we go here. Take care. Bye bye.